The slap came before the insult. Adunni tasted copper on her tongue as her head snapped to the side, her cheek slamming against the cold concrete wall of the basement apartment. The dim yellow bulb overhead flickered like it was considering going out completely, casting jagged shadows across the cramped room that smelled of stale soju and something darker she had learned not to name. Her stepfather stood in the doorway, his silhouette blocking the only exit. Babatunde was a large man, towering and broad-shouldered, and right now his chest heaved with the kind of rage that made smart people disappear. But Adunni had nowhere to disappear to. Not in Seoul. Not in this country where she barely spoke the language, and had no one who would answer if she screamed. She pressed her palm against her burning cheek and forced herself to look at him. That was the trick. Never look away. Never give him the satisfaction of seeing her crumble completely. You think you can disrespect me? His voice was low, controlled, which somehow made it worse. When he yelled, at least she could predict the explosion. This quiet fury was a loaded gun with no safety. You think because your mother is dead, you have the right to speak to me like that? Adunni's jaw tightened. Her mother. The woman who had brought her to South Korea 3 years ago, chasing promises of a better life with this man she had married too quickly. The woman who had died 6 months later in a car accident that Adunni still had nightmares about. The woman who had left her daughter alone with a monster, wearing a kind man's mask.
I asked you a simple question.
Adunni said.
Where is
her
the
voice
money I earned
steadier
from
than
cleaning
she
the
felt.
restaurant?
Where is the money I earned from cleaning the restaurant? His laugh was sharp and ugly. Your money? Everything you touch belongs to me. Your clothes, your food, the air you breathe in this apartment. You exist because I allow it. He moved closer, and Adunni fought every instinct, screaming at her to run. There was nowhere to run. The apartment was barely bigger than a storage closet, tucked into the basement of a building in Itaewon, where nobody asked questions and neighbors minded their business. My mother would never forgive you for this, she whispered. The second slap was harder. Her vision blurred, and she felt something warm trickling from her lip. Blood. She touched it with trembling fingers, staring at the red smear like it belonged to someone else. Your mother was a fool, Babatunde said coldly, and you are just like her. But let me make something very clear, Adunni. You will do exactly what I say when I say it, or I will make you wish you had died in that car with her. He grabbed her by the arm, his fingers digging into her skin hard enough to bruise, and shoved her toward the corner of the room, where a thin mattress lay on the floor. She stumbled, catching herself against the wall, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Stay here, he ordered. And if I hear one sound, one word, I will remind you exactly who owns you. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. Adunni stood frozen for several seconds, her breathing shallow and quick. Then her knees gave out, and she sank onto the mattress, pressing her hands over her mouth to muffle the sob clawing its way up her throat. She could not cry. Not yet. Crying was for later, when she was safe. If she ever became safe again. Her eyes drifted to the narrow window near the ceiling, too high and too small for anyone to climb through. Beyond it, Seoul glittered with lights, a city full of people who had no idea she existed. A city that had promised her mother opportunity and had delivered only pain. She wiped the blood from her lip with the back of her hand and forced herself to think, to plan. Because staying here meant dying, slowly or quickly, and she refused to let this man be the author of her ending. Her gaze landed on something across the room. Babatunde's wallet, carelessly tossed onto a small table near the door. He must have thrown it there when he came in, too angry to remember it. Adunni's pulse quickened. She glanced at the locked door, listening. His heavy footsteps moved overhead, pacing. He was still awake, still angry, probably drinking. But if she was quiet, if she was careful. She rose slowly, her body protesting every movement. Her ribs ached from where he had shoved her, and her cheek throbbed with a dull, persistent fire. She ignored it all, and crept towards the table, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. Her hand closed around the wallet. It was worn leather, thick with bills. She opened it with trembling fingers and stared at the stack of Korean won inside. More money than she had seen in months. Enough to buy a bus ticket. Enough to run. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, soft and warm. "You are stronger than you know, my daughter. Never forget that." Adunni swallowed hard and pulled the bills from the wallet, folding them quickly and tucking them into the waistband of her pants, beneath her shirt. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped them twice, but she managed. She put the empty wallet back on the table, exactly where it had been. Then she returned to the mattress and lay down, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding like war drums. Overhead, Babatunde's footsteps finally slowed. A door creaked. Silence. Adunni closed her eyes and waited. Tomorrow she would run. And this time, she would not stop. The rain started just after midnight. Adunni heard it first as a soft patter against the tiny window, then as a steady drumming that matched the frantic rhythm of her pulse. She had been awake for hours, lying perfectly still, listening to Babatunde's snores rumbling through the thin ceiling above her. She had one chance, maybe less than one. Moving slowly, she sat up and reached for her shoes. Old sneakers, worn thin at the soles, but they were better than bare feet on Seoul's wet streets. She tied them with clumsy fingers, her hands still shaking from adrenaline and fear. The money pressed against her skin like a secret promise. She stood and crept toward the door. Her breath came in shallow sips as she reached for the handle, praying it would not creak, praying the lock would give, praying for a miracle she did not deserve. The handle turned. The door opened. Babatunde had forgotten to lock it completely. Adunni's heart nearly stopped. She froze, waiting for the sound of movement upstairs, for his voice to shatter the fragile silence. Nothing. Only the rain and his distant snoring. She slipped through the doorway into the narrow hallway that led to the building's back exit. The concrete walls were damp and cold, lit by a single flickering bulb that cast everything in sickly yellow light. She moved like a ghost, every step measured, every breath controlled. The exit door loomed ahead. Freedom. Escape. Life. She pushed it open and stepped into the rain. The cold water hit her like a baptism, soaking through her thin clothes in seconds. She did not care. She ran, her shoes slapping against the wet pavement, her lungs burning as she sprinted down the narrow alley behind the building. Seoul at night was a different world. Neon signs glowed through the rain, casting streaks of pink and blue across the slick streets. A few people hurried past with umbrellas, heads down, ignoring her completely. She was invisible. Just another desperate soul in a city full of them. She made it 3 blocks before she heard his voice. Adunni. The sound of her name ripped through the rain like a gunshot. She did not look back. She ran harder, her legs screaming, her vision blurring with rain and tears. She ducked into another alley, then another, weaving through the maze of Seoul's back streets like a hunted animal. His footsteps pounded behind her, heavy and relentless. "You cannot run from me! I will find you!" She spotted a food truck parked at the end of the alley, its metal undercarriage just high enough. Without thinking, she dropped to the ground and rolled beneath it, pressing herself flat against the cold, oil-stained pavement. Her chest heaved as she clamped a hand over her mouth, forcing herself to breathe quietly despite her body's desperate need for air. Babatunde's footsteps grew louder, closer. She watched his shoes appear, heavy boots splashing through puddles, moving slowly now. Hunting. He stopped just a few feet from the truck, and she could hear his ragged breathing, could smell the sour stench of alcohol even from where she hid. "I know you are here," he said, his voice chillingly calm. "You think you are smart? You think you can survive out here without me? You are nothing. Nobody. This city will chew you up and spit you out." Adunni bit down on her hand to keep from sobbing. Then, salvation. The roar of a delivery scooter echoed down the alley, its headlight cutting through the rain. Babatunde cursed and moved away, his footsteps fading, as the scooter drew closer. She waited. 5 minutes. 10. When she finally crawled out from under the truck, her clothes were filthy, and her entire body trembled with exhaustion and shock. But she was alive. She stumbled through the streets until she found a bus terminal, a small one on the outskirts of Itaewon. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and a handful of tired travelers sat on plastic benches, waiting for early morning buses. Adunni collapsed onto a bench in the corner and pulled out the stolen money with shaking hands. She counted it twice, her heart sinking. It was not enough. Not nearly enough for what she needed. A man sat down beside her, middle-aged, greasy hair, smile too wide. "You look lost," he said in broken English. "Need help?" She shifted away. "No, thank you." His hand landed on her knee. "Come on, I can help you. Pretty girl like you should not be alone." Something snapped inside Adunni. All the fear, all the rage, all the months of being silent and small and invisible exploded outward. She grabbed his wrist and twisted it hard, her nails digging into his skin. "Touch me again and I will scream until every person in this terminal knows your face," she hissed. He yanked his hand back, muttering curses, and hurried away. Adunni sat there, breathing hard, her hands still shaking. Then she looked up at the departure board and saw it. Busan. A city far from here. Far from Babatunde, far from this nightmare. She walked to the counter and bought a ticket with almost all her remaining money. The bus left in 20 minutes. She spent those 20 minutes in the bathroom, washing the blood and dirt from her face, staring at the stranger in the mirror. Her cheek was swollen and purple. Her lip was split. Her eyes looked hollow. But she was still standing. The bus ride south was a blur of darkness and exhaustion. She pressed her forehead against the cold window and watched Seoul disappear behind her, the city lights fading into nothing. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered that she was not safe yet, that running was only the beginning. But for now, she let herself believe in the lie of distance. For now, she let herself hope. Busan hit her like a wall of salt air and noise. The bus terminal was massive compared to the one in Seoul, packed with people shouting, dragging luggage, pushing past each other in controlled chaos. Adunni stepped off the bus and immediately felt smaller, more lost than she had ever been. It was late evening now, the sky bruised purple and orange as the sun set somewhere beyond the buildings. She had no plan, no destination. Just the last few bills crumpled in her pocket and a desperate clawing need to disappear. She started walking, letting the crowd carry her towards the exit. Outside, the city sprawled in every direction, gleaming towers mixed with older buildings, everything drenched in neon and shadow. The ocean smell was stronger here, mixed with street food and exhaust. Fumes. Her stomach growled viciously. She had not eaten since yesterday morning. She bought a small container of tteokbokki from a street vendor, spending money she could not afford to spend, but her body was shutting down. She ate quickly, barely tasting it, standing in the shadow of a convenience store while people flowed past her like water around a stone. Then she noticed them. 2 men across the street, watching her. One nudged the other, and they started moving in her direction. Adunni's instincts screamed. She threw the empty container into a trash bin and walked quickly in the opposite direction, her pulse spiking. She glanced back once. They were following. She broke into a run. The streets blurred. She dodged through crowds, turned down side streets, her lungs burning again. The men kept pace, calling out to her in Korean, words she did not fully understand but whose intent was crystal clear. Ahead, she saw it. A tall, sleek building with glass doors and soft lighting, spilling onto the sidewalk. Luxury apartments, the kind of place where people like her did not belong. But it had security, and security meant witnesses. She sprinted toward the entrance and shoved through the glass doors, nearly colliding with a woman in an expensive coat. The lobby was pristine, marble floors, modern furniture. A security guard at the desk looked up sharply. Adunni spun around. The 2 men had stopped outside, lingering near the entrance but not entering. They knew they could not follow her here. "Hey!" The security guard stood up, speaking rapid Korean. She caught the tone, if not the words. "What are you doing here? You do not belong." She raised her hands, trying to look harmless, trying to think of what to say in her broken Korean. But before she could speak, the elevator across the lobby chimed softly. The doors slid open. A man stepped out. Adunni's breath caught. He was tall and lean, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than she had earned in her entire life. His hair was dark and styled back, his face sharp and aristocratic. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold. Dark, calculating, missing nothing. The kind of eyes that saw through people. He paused when he noticed the commotion. His gaze moved from the agitated security guard to Adunni, taking in her torn clothes, her bruised face, the way she stood like a cornered animal ready to fight or flee. For a long moment, no one moved. Then he spoke, his voice low and smooth, in perfect English. "Who did this to you?" The question was so unexpected, so direct, that Adunni could not answer immediately. She just stared at him, this stranger who had no reason to care, no reason to even acknowledge her existence. The security guard said something sharp in Korean. The man raised one hand, silencing him instantly without even looking away from Adunni. "I asked you a question," he said again, stepping closer. "Who hurt you?" Her throat tightened. "It does not matter. It matters to me." She did not know why, but something in his tone, in the way he looked at her like she was a person and not a problem, made the walls crack. Just a little. "My stepfather," she whispered. "I ran. From Seoul. I do not have anywhere to go. His expression did not change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition. Not of her, but of the situation. Of desperation. He turned to the security guard and spoke in rapid Korean. The guard hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but nodded slowly and sat back down. Then the man looked at Adunni again. "Come with me." "What? No, I do not even know you." "My name is Park Jae-hyun, and right now I am the only option you have." She wanted to argue, wanted to run again, but her body was failing, her mind too tired to fight anymore. And those men were still outside, waiting. Jae-hyun gestured towards the elevator. 5 minutes. Just let me see those injuries properly. Then you can decide what you want to do. Adunni hesitated, every instinct screaming that this was a trap, that men who looked like him and lived in buildings like this did not help girls like her without wanting something in return. But she was so tired, so desperately, achingly tired. She followed him into the elevator. The doors closed with a soft hiss, sealing her inside with this stranger. The elevator rose smoothly, numbers climbing on the digital display. 30, 35, 40. "You live at the top?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Penthouse," he confirmed. He stood with his hands in his pockets, watching the numbers climb, his expression unreadable. "Why are you helping me?" He glanced at her then, and for the first time, something almost human crossed his face. "Because I know what it looks like when someone is running from monsters." The elevator stopped. The doors opened into a private hallway with only one door at the end. Jae-hyun walked toward it, and after a moment's hesitation, Adunni followed. He unlocked the door and stepped aside, letting her enter first. The penthouse was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering sprawl of Busan, the ocean a dark line in the distance. Everything was sleek, modern, expensive, the kind of place she had only seen in movies. "Sit," Jae-hyun said, gesturing to a leather couch. "I will get the first aid kit." Adunni sat stiffly, her hands clenched in her lap. This was insane. She was in a stranger's home, at the top of a tower, with no way out if things went wrong. But when he returned with the kit and knelt in front of her, his movements were careful, professional. He cleaned the cut on her lip with surprising gentleness, his expression focused. "You are lucky," he said quietly. "It is not deep. It will heal." "Lucky is not the word I would use." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fair enough." He finished and sat back on his heels, studying her. "Now, let us talk about what happens next." Adunni stared at him, suspicion coiling, tight in her chest. "What do you mean? What happens next?" Jae-hyun stood and moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, his silhouette dark against the glittering cityscape. He was quiet for a long moment, hands in his pockets, and she wondered if he was reconsidering helping her at all. "You need protection," he said finally, "and money. Somewhere safe to stay while you figure out your next move. And you are offering this out of kindness?" Her voice was sharper than she intended, but she had learned the hard way that nothing was free. He turned to face her, and his expression was unreadable. "No, not kindness. I need something too." There it was. The catch. She stood up, her muscles tensing. "I am not doing that. Whatever you think I will do for money, I would rather die on the street." "Sit down," he said calmly. "It is not that." "Then what?" "I need a fiancé." Adunni blinked. Of all the things she had expected him to say, that was not one of them. "What?" Jae-hyun moved to a sleek bar cart, and poured himself a drink. Whiskey, from the smell. He did not offer her any. My family owns one of the largest shipping companies in South Korea, but my father is old-fashioned. He believes a man in my position should be settled. Married. He has been pressuring me to find someone appropriate for 2 years now. So, find someone appropriate. I do not want to marry, he said bluntly. Marriage in my world is a business transaction, and I have no interest in being tied to someone for the rest of my life just to satisfy my father's outdated values. Adunni crossed her arms. Then tell him no. It is not that simple. If I refuse, he will cut me out of the company. He has done it before to my older brother when he displeased him. I have worked too hard to lose everything now. And where do I fit into this? He took a slow sip of his drink, his dark eyes fixed on her. You pretend to be my fiancé. 1 month. We appear together at family dinners, business events. Anywhere my father's circle will see us. You play the role convincingly, and at the end of the month, we stage a quiet breakup. You get 60 million won, enough to start over anywhere you want. New city, new country if you prefer. 60 million won. Adunni's mind spun. That was more money than she could earn in years, enough to disappear completely, enough to build an actual life. Why me? She asked. You could hire an actress, someone trained for this. Because you are real, Jae-hyun said simply. You have actual bruises, actual fear in your eyes. My father is not a fool. He would see through a performance. But you? You are someone I might actually want to protect. The story writes itself. I met you, I fell for you, I am helping you. It is believable. The words stung, even though she knew he did not mean them cruelly. She was a prop, a convenient narrative. And if I say no, she asked, then I will give you 10,000 won and wish you luck. But we both know that is not enough. Your stepfather will find you eventually. Men like him always do. You need more than a bus ticket. You need to disappear properly. He was right, and she hated that he was right. What are the rules? She asked quietly. Jae-hyun's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been approval. No touching beyond what is necessary for appearances. We maintain separate spaces in the penthouse. You do not ask about my business, and I do not ask about your past beyond what I need to know to make the story convincing. You follow my lead at events, and you play the role well. That is all. And after the month, you take the money and disappear. We never see each other again. It sounded too easy, too clean, but standing there in that massive penthouse, exhausted and terrified, and so desperately tired of running, she could not think of a better option. Okay, she said finally, 1 month. Something flickered across Jae-hyun's face. Relief, maybe. Good. I will have a contract drawn up in the morning. Legal protection for both of us. You trust a contract to keep me quiet? No, he said coolly. But I trust that you are smart enough to know that crossing me would be worse than anything your stepfather could do. The threat hung in the air between them, calm and absolute. Adunni felt a chill run down her spine, but she did not look away. Understood, she said. He nodded once. The guest room is down that hall, second door on the left. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you. My assistant keeps them on hand for situations like this. Situations like this? Unexpected guests? He did not elaborate. Adunni walked towards the hallway, then paused. Why are you really doing this? And do not say it is just about your father. Jae-hyun turned back to the window. his reflection ghostly in the glass. Because I know what it is like to be trapped. And sometimes the only way out is to make a deal with someone just as trapped as you are. She did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She found the guest room and closed the door behind her, leaning against it as her legs finally gave out. She slid to the floor and buried her face in her hands. 1 month. 60 million won. A new life. All she had to do was survive a little longer. Outside the door, she heard Jae-hyun's footsteps moving through the penthouse, then the soft clink of his glass being set down. She wondered what kind of man lived in a place this beautiful and still called himself trapped. Maybe she would find out. Or maybe, if she was smart, she would take the money and never look back. The first week was strange in ways Adunni had not anticipated. Jae-hyun was rarely home during the day, disappearing before she woke and returning late at night. When he was there, he was polite but distant, treating her like a business associate rather than a person sharing his space. Which was fine. She did not need warmth from him. She needed safety and money, and he was providing both. The penthouse had everything she could need. A kitchen stocked with food she did not recognize but learned to cook. A bathroom with water pressure that felt like luxury. Clothes that actually fit. Expensive brands with tags still attached. It felt like living in someone else's dream. But it was the small things that caught her off guard. The way Jae-hyun's assistant, a stern woman named Miss Kim, brought her Korean language books without being asked. The way there was always fresh fruit in the kitchen, the kind her mother used to buy when they could afford it. The way Jae-hyun never raised his voice, never moved too quickly, as if he understood that sudden movements made her flinch. On the 4th day, she found him in the living room late at night, working on a laptop. The glow from the screen cast sharp shadows across his face. "You are still awake," he said without looking up. "Could not sleep." She hesitated in the doorway. "Can I ask you something?" "Go. Ahead." "What do you actually do? For work, I mean." Now he did look up, one eyebrow raised. "I thought the rule was no questions about my business." "You said I should not ask about your business specifically. I am asking what you do. There is a difference." A faint smile crossed his lips. "Clever. I manage shipping routes and logistics for my family's company. Import and export. Very boring." "That is not boring. That is how the world moves." He studied her for a moment. "You are educated." "My mother made sure of it. She wanted me to have opportunities." The words hurt to say. Everything about her mother hurt. Jae-hyun closed his laptop. "Sit down. You look like you are about to run." Adunni sat on the opposite end of the couch, keeping distance between them. "Your assistant gave me language books. Why?" "Because you will need to speak Korean convincingly if you are going to be my fiancé. People will expect it." "That is practical. I am always practical." "Are you?" She surprised herself by pushing. "Because taking in a stranger seems impractical." He was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe I have my impractical moments." Something in the way he said it made her chest tighten. She changed the subject quickly. "When is the first event?" "Tomorrow night. Dinner with my father and his business partners. You will meet him then?" Her stomach dropped. "Tomorrow? That is fast." "It is better to start immediately. Less time for you to overthink it." He stood and moved toward his room. "Miss Kim will bring you appropriate clothes in the morning. Just follow my lead and you will be fine." Wait. He stopped, turning back. What if I mess up? You will not. How do you know? Because you survived this long, Jae-hyun said quietly. That takes more strength than pretending to like me for a few hours. He left her sitting there, his words echoing in the empty room. The next evening, Adunni stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized herself. The dress Miss Kim had brought was elegant and understated, deep blue fabric that hugged her frame without being revealing. Her hair was styled, her makeup subtle but polished. The bruises on her face had faded enough to cover with concealer. She looked like someone who belonged in Jae-hyun's world. The thought terrified her. You look perfect. Jae-hyun's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him in the doorway, also dressed formally, and for the first time she saw him as others must. Powerful, untouchable, dangerous in the way that comes from money and control. I do not feel perfect, she admitted. Good. Perfection is boring. He held out his arm. Ready? She took his arm, feeling the solid warmth of him through the fabric of his jacket. What is your father like? Demanding. Traditional. He will test you to see if you are good enough for me. Do not let him intimidate you. Easier said than done. Adunni. He stopped, turning to face her. You faced down your stepfather and survived. You ran across a city alone with nothing. You were stronger than anyone at that dinner. Remember that. Something cracked open in her chest. It was the first time he had said her name like it mattered. The restaurant was exclusive, the kind of place where doormen opened doors, and every table cost more than a month's rent. Jae-hyun guided her through with easy confidence, his hand resting lightly on her back. His father was already seated when they arrived. Park Dong-min was an older version of Jae-hyun, sharp-featured and calculating. He stood as they approached, his eyes sweeping over Adunni with clinical assessment. Father, this is Adunni Olatunji, Jae-hyun said smoothly. Adunni, my father. Mr. Park, she said, bowing slightly the way Miss Kim had taught her. He did not smile. Sit. The dinner was brutal in its civility. Park Dong-min asked her questions in rapid Korean, sometimes switching to English, clearly testing her ability to keep up. Where was she from? How did she meet his son? What were her intentions? Jae-hyun had coached her on the story. They had met at a charity event. She had been volunteering. He had been drawn to her kindness. It was a romance born from unlikely circumstances but genuine feeling. She played the role perfectly, letting nervousness show but not weakness, answering questions honestly where she could, and deflecting skillfully where she could not. And when Park Dong-min finally leaned back in his chair and said, "You are not what I expected," she met his eyes and said, "Good. Expectations are boring." Jae-hyun nearly choked on his wine. For the first time, Park Dong-min smiled. Maybe you are exactly what my son needs. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of business talk and politics, Adunni mostly listening, contributing when spoken to. But under the table, she felt Jae-hyun's hand briefly touch hers. A silent acknowledgement. You did well. When they finally returned to the penthouse, Adunni collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion hitting her like a wave. You were incredible, Jae-hyun said, pouring 2 glasses of wine. He handed her one. My father liked you. I could not tell. Trust me, if he did not, you would know. She sipped the wine, feeling the warmth spread through her. This is harder than I thought. It will get easier. But as the days passed, it did not get easier. It got more complicated. By the third week, the lines between performance and reality had started to blur. Adunni knew it was dangerous, knew she should keep the walls up, but living with someone changed things. She learned that Jae-hyun took his coffee black and hated mornings, that he worked obsessively when stressed, sometimes forgetting to eat. That despite the cold exterior, he listened when she spoke, really listened, like her words had weight. And he learned about her too, how she hummed when she cooked, old songs her mother used to sing, how she was terrified of thunderstorms but would never admit it. How she read the Korean language books late into the night, determined to prove she belonged here, even temporarily. They fell into routines. Morning coffee together before he left for work. Late-night conversations when neither could sleep. The pretense of being a couple at events became easier because parts of it stopped feeling like pretense at all. That was the problem. "You are staring," Jae-hyun said one evening, looking up from his laptop. Adunni blinked, realizing she had been watching him work for the past 10 minutes. "Sorry, just thinking." "About? How strange this all is." She pulled her knees to her chest on the couch. "A month ago I was locked in a basement. Now I am pretending to be engaged to a shipping magnate." "Technically you are pretending to be engaged to the son of a shipping magnate. I have not inherited anything yet." "Does that distinction matter?" "To my father, yes. To me, no." He closed the laptop. "What is really bothering you?" She hesitated. The truth was complicated. The truth was that she was starting to care about him, and caring was dangerous. Caring meant vulnerability, and vulnerability got you hurt. "I have been thinking about after," she said carefully. "After the month ends, where I will go." Something shifted in Jae-hyun's expression. "Have you decided?" "Not yet. Maybe somewhere warm, somewhere far from here." "That is vague." "It is all I have right now." He stood and moved to sit beside her, closer than he usually did. "You do not have to decide today, or even next week. The month is almost over. We can extend the arrangement if needed." Her heart skipped. Why would we do that? Jae-hyun looked at her, and for the first time, the careful mask he always wore cracked just slightly. "Because I am not ready for you to leave yet." The words hung between them, honest and raw. Adunni felt her breath catch, felt the careful distance they had maintained threatening to collapse entirely. "Jae-hyun," she whispered. "I know," he said quietly. "I know this was supposed to be business, but somewhere along the way, it stopped being just business for me." She should have pulled away, should have reminded him of the rules, of the contract, of the fact that in a few days she was supposed to take her money and disappear. But instead, she stayed exactly where she was. "For me too," she admitted. He reached out slowly, giving her time to move, and when she did not, his hand cupped her face with a gentleness that made her chest ache. "I am not good at this," he said. "I do not know how to be what you need." "You have already been what I needed. You gave me safety when I had none. I want to give you more than safety." Before she could respond, before she could think about all the reasons this was complicated and messy and probably a terrible idea, he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was afraid she would break. But when she kissed him back, something ignited between them. Weeks of tension and unspoken feelings poured into that kiss, desperate and hungry and real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jae-hyun rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said. "Not because of the contract, Not because of money. Stay because you want to. Adunni's mind spun. This was not the plan. The plan was survival. The plan was escape. The plan was never falling for the man who was supposed to be temporary. But plans changed. Life changed. And maybe, just maybe, she was allowed to want something for herself. "Okay," she whispered. "I will stay." The relief that crossed his face was so profound it almost broke her. They spent that night talking until dawn, curled together on the couch, sharing pieces of themselves they had kept hidden. He told her about the pressure of his family's expectations, the loneliness of always being watched, the fear that he would never be more than his father's heir. She told him about her mother, about the guilt of surviving when she had not, about the nightmares that still woke her in the middle of the night. "You are not alone anymore," Jae-hyun said, his fingers threading through hers. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." It was a promise neither of them knew if they could keep, but in that moment, it felt like truth. 3 days later, everything changed. Adunni woke feeling nauseous, barely making it to the bathroom before she was sick. She assumed it was stress, or maybe something she ate. But when it happened again the next morning, and the morning after that, a cold dread settled in her stomach. No, it could not be. But deep down, she already knew. She bought a test from a pharmacy while Jae-hyun was at work, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. The 2 minutes she waited for the result felt like hours. Positive. The word on the little screen blurred as tears filled her eyes. She sank to the bathroom floor, her back against the tub, trying to breathe through the panic. She was pregnant, with find Jae-hyun's child. A man she had known for less than a month. A man whose world was so far from hers they might as well be different species. What was she supposed to do? When Jae-hyun came home that evening, he found her sitting in the dark, staring out at the city lights. "Adunni?" His voice was laced with concern. "What is wrong?" She turned to face him, and whatever he saw in her expression made him cross the room immediately. "Tell me," he said, kneeling in front of her. "Whatever it is, we will handle it." She took a shaky breath. "I am pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Jae-hyun stared at her, his expression frozen, unreadable. Adunni felt her heart hammering against her ribs, waiting for him to say something. Anything. Finally, he spoke. "Is it mine?" The question was clinical, careful, but it still cut. She nodded, unable to find words. He stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back to her. She watched his shoulders rise and fall with controlled breaths, watched him process the information that had just upended both their lives. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice tight. "I took the test this morning." More silence. Then he turned, and the expression on his face was something she had never seen before. Not anger, not rejection, something raw, something like fear. "Do you want to keep it?" he asked. The question hung between them. Adunni pressed a hand to her still flat stomach, feeling the weight of a choice she had not expected to make. "I do not know," she whispered honestly. "I do not know anything right now." Jae-hyun crossed back to her in 3 strides and dropped to his knees again, taking her hands in his. "Listen to me. Whatever you decide, I am with you. If you want to keep the baby, we will figure it out. If you do not, I will support that too. This is your choice." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Your father will lose his mind. Your family. The business." "I do not care." "You should care. This is Your entire life. And you are part of my life now, he said fiercely. You and this baby, that matters more than any of the rest of it. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that love was enough, that they could build something real from the wreckage of their circumstances. But she had learned the hard way that wanting something did not make it true. I need time to think, she said. Take all the time you need. But they did not have time, because the next morning, everything went to hell. Adunni woke to the sound of shouting, not Jae-hyun's voice, someone else, multiple someones. She stumbled out of bed and opened her door to chaos. The penthouse was full of men, armed men, not police, something worse. Jae-hyun was in the living room, positioned protectively between her and the intruders, his face a mask of cold fury. I told you to leave, he said in Korean, his voice deadly calm. One of the men laughed, a sound like breaking glass. He was tall, pale, with the kind of build that came from violence. You think you can just walk away, Park? You think you can burn bridges and there will be no consequences? Dimitri, Jae-hyun said, and Adunni heard the recognition in his voice, heard the history. The man, Dimitri, smiled. It was not a kind smile. You owe me money, a lot of money, and I have come to collect. The shipment was intercepted by customs. That is not my fault. But it was your responsibility. You guaranteed safe passage. You failed. Jae-hyun's jaw tightened. I will get you your money. Just leave. Dimitri's eyes shifted past Jae-hyun to Adunni, still frozen in the bedroom doorway. His smile widened. Or maybe I take something else as collateral. Your pretty girlfriend, perhaps? Everything happened too fast after that. Jae-hyun moved, trying to get to her. One of Dimitri's men raised a gun. Adunni screamed. The gunshot was deafening. Jae-hyun jerked backward, a bloom of red spreading across his shoulder. He went down hard, and Adunni's world tilted sideways. She ran to him, dropping to her knees, pressing her hands against the wound. His blood was hot and slick between her fingers. No, 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 she chanted. Stay with me, please. His hand found hers, weak but present. Run, he gasped. When you get the chance, run. I am not leaving you. Adunni. His eyes locked on hers, fierce despite the pain. Protect the baby, go! Before she could respond, rough hands grabbed her, yanking her away from him. She fought, screaming, clawing at the man holding her, but he was too strong. They dragged her toward the elevator while Jae-hyun tried to stand and collapsed again. The last thing she saw before the elevator doors closed was his blood spreading across the white marble floor. They took her to a warehouse by the docks, the kind of place that smelled like rust and old fish and things best left forgotten. They tied her to a chair in the center of a vast empty space, and Dimitri circled her like a predator. You know what I think? He said conversationally. I think you are worth more than money to Park Jae-hyun. I think if I threaten to hurt you, he will give me everything I want. Adunni said nothing. She was barely holding herself together, terror and fury warring inside her. Or maybe, Dimitri continued, I just kill you. Send your body back to him as a message. Either way, I win. The door to the warehouse opened, and another man entered. Korean, expensively dressed, familiar, it took Adunni a moment to place him. Choi Sung-woo, Jae-hyun's former business partner. She had met him once at a dinner. Is it done? Dimitri asked. Sung-woo nodded. Park is wounded but alive. He will come for her, and when he does, we will have him exactly where we want him. Betrayal. It was always betrayal. Adunni closed her eyes, and thought of Jae-hyun bleeding on his penthouse floor. Thought of the baby growing inside her. Thought of every person who had ever hurt her, and promised herself that if she survived this, she would never be helpless again. She just had to survive. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning in that warehouse. She could hear the ocean, could feel the cold creeping into her bones. She tested her restraints carefully, looking for weakness, finding none. Then she heard it. Gunfire. Not close, but getting closer. Dimitri tensed, pulling a weapon. Seung-woo swore and ran for the side exit. The main door exploded inward, and Jae-hyun came through like an avenging angel, blood soaking his shoulder but his gun steady. Behind him, men she did not recognize. His people. What followed was chaos. Dimitri's men returned fire. Jae-hyun's men advanced. Adunni ducked as low as she could in the chair, splinters of wood and concrete flying. Someone cut her restraints. One of Jae-hyun's guards, his face grim. Run to the side door, now. But before she could move, Dimitri was there, his gun pressed to her temple. Nobody moves or she dies. Everyone froze. Jae-hyun stood 20 feet away, his gun aimed at Dimitri, his face pale from blood loss, but his hand perfectly steady. Blood had soaked through the makeshift bandage on his shoulder, spreading down his chest, but his eyes were clear and cold and absolutely lethal. "Let her go," he said, his voice carrying across the warehouse. "This is between you and me." Dimitri laughed, the gun pressing harder against Adunni's head. She could feel the cold metal, could smell his sweat and cologne, could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. "That is where you are wrong, Park. The moment you cared about her, she became part of this." "Name your price," Jae-hyun said. "Money, territory, whatever you want. Just let her walk out of here." "I want you to suffer." Dimitri's voice turned vicious. "I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything, just like you made me lose everything." Adunni felt the gun shake slightly. Dimitri was unstable, rage overriding reason. She caught Jae-hyun's eyes and saw him calculating, saw him trying to find an opening that would not get her killed. She had to do something, had to give him a chance. She thought of her mother, thought of the baby inside her, thought of Jae-hyun, who had saved her once already and was bleeding out trying to save her again. She thought of every time she had been helpless, every time she had frozen, every time fear had stolen her voice. Not anymore. Adunni drove her elbow backward with everything she had, aiming for Dimitri's ribs. He grunted, his grip loosening just slightly, and she threw herself sideways. The gun went off, deafening, the bullet missing her by inches. Jae-hyun did not miss. His shot caught Dimitri in the chest, and the man dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Adunni scrambled away, her ears ringing, her hands shaking so badly she could barely push herself upright. Then Jae-hyun was there, pulling her into his arms despite his injury, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I have got you," he said into her. "Hair. I have got you. You are safe." Around them, his men were securing the warehouse, checking bodies, making sure no threats remained. She heard someone on a phone calling for medical support. But all Adunni could focus on was the blood soaking through Jae-hyun's shirt onto hers. "You are hurt," she said, her voice breaking. "You need a hospital." "I am fine." "You are not fine. You were shot." "Then it was worth it." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands cupping her cheeks. "You and the baby, are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "No, just tied me up. But Jae-hyun, you are bleeding." One of his guards approached. "Boss, we need to move. Police will be here soon." Jae-hyun nodded and tried to stand, then swayed. Adunni caught him, her arm around his waist, taking as much of his weight as she could. "I am getting you out of here," she said firmly. "And then you are going to a hospital whether you like it or not." He managed a weak smile. "Bossy, you have no idea." They made it to the car. Jae-hyun leaning heavily on her, his breathing labored. Once inside, she kept pressure on his wound while his driver sped through Busan streets toward a private clinic. Jae-hyun's head rested against her shoulder, his eyes closed. "Stay awake," she ordered. "Talk to me." "About what?" "Anything. Tell me about your first memory." "My first memory?" His voice was faint but present. "I was 4. My father took me to the docks to see our ships. I thought they were the biggest things in the world." They probably were, to a 4-year-old. "I asked him if I could be a captain when I grew up. He said no. Captains work for people like us. I should learn to own things, not steer them." "That is a terrible thing to tell a child." "Welcome to my family." He opened his eyes, looking at her. "Promise me something." "Do not start making dying declarations. You are not dying." "Promise me," he insisted, "that our child will be different, that they will know they can be whatever they want, captain, artist, whatever makes them happy." Tears burned her eyes. "I promise. We both promise. Now stop talking like you were saying goodbye." The clinic was discreet, expensive, the kind of place that did not ask questions. The doctor, a woman in her 50s who clearly knew Jae-hyun, took one look at him and started barking orders. They sedated him before surgery, and the last thing he did before going under was grab Adunni's hand. "Do not leave," he said. "I am not going anywhere." The surgery took 2 hours. Adunni spent them pacing the waiting room, replaying everything in her head. The gunshot, the warehouse, Dimitri's gun against her head, the look in Jae-hyun's eyes when he fired. She should have been traumatized, should have been falling apart. But instead she felt strangely calm, focused, like something had clicked into place. She was not running anymore, she was fighting. When the doctor finally emerged, Adunni stood so fast she nearly knocked over a chair. "Is he okay?" "He will live," the doctor said. "The bullet went through clean. No major damage. He was lucky." Relief hit her so hard she had to sit down. "Can I see him?" "He is in recovery. Give him an hour to wake up fully." That hour felt like a year. When they finally let her in, Jae-hyun was propped up in bed, looking exhausted but alive. His shoulder was bandaged properly now, his shirt replaced with hospital scrubs. "Hey," he said when he saw her. "Hey yourself." She sat in the chair beside his bed and took his hand. "How do you feel?" "Like I got shot." "That is because you did get shot. You idiot, you should have waited for backup." "There was no time. If I had waited—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "I could not let them hurt you. So you got yourself shot instead. Fair trade." "It is not a fair trade." Her voice cracked. "You could have died. Do you understand that? You could have died, and I would have been left alone with a baby and no idea how to survive in this country." He squeezed her hand. "But I did not die. We are both here. We are both safe. For now. For now is enough." She wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the ways this was unsustainable, but she was too tired. Instead, she rested her head carefully against his uninjured shoulder and closed her eyes. "We cannot stay in Busan," Jae-hyun said quietly. "Dimitri had allies. They will come looking for revenge. Where do we go? I have been thinking about that. His fingers threaded through her hair, gentle and soothing. What would you say to starting over completely? New city, new life, no more business deals, no more danger. She lifted her head to look at him. You would really walk away from everything? I already decided to walk away the moment I realized I loved you, he said simply. Everything else is just details. 2 weeks later, Adunni stood on a beach in Jeju Island, her bare feet sinking into cool sand, watching the sun set over water so blue it hurt to look at. Behind her, the small house Jae-hyun had rented sat nestled against a hillside, simple and perfect, and nothing like the luxury penthouse in Busan. Everything had moved quickly after the warehouse. Jae-hyun had burned bridges methodically and completely. He handed control of his share in the family business to his younger brother, signed over properties, cut ties with everyone connected to his old life. His father had been furious, but Jae-hyun had been unmovable. I choose her, he had said to his father's face. I choose the life we are building, and if that means losing everything else, so be it. Now they were here, far from Seoul, far from Busan, far from the violence that had nearly destroyed them both. Jae-hyun came up behind her, his arm wrapping carefully around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. The wound was healing well, though he still favored that side. What are you thinking about? He asked. How strange it is that 3 months ago I was locked in a basement, and now I am standing on a beach planning a future with you. Good strange or bad strange? Good strange. Terrifying strange. But good. He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face the way they always did when he needed her full attention. I know this is not easy, starting over, leaving everything behind, but I meant what I said. I choose this. I choose you. I know you do. That is not what scares me. Then what does? Adunni took a breath. What if I am not good enough? What if I cannot be the mother this baby needs? What if I am too damaged, too broken, and I pass all of that trauma down? His expression softened. You are not broken. You are one of the strongest people I've ever met. Strength is not the same as being whole. No one is whole, Adunni. We are all carrying something. He pressed his forehead to hers. But we do not have to carry it alone anymore. She let herself lean into him, let herself believe, just for a moment, that love might actually be enough. They started building a routine. Mornings, Jae-hyun would cook breakfast, his Korean dishes getting slightly better each time, while Adunni attempted to learn the language with increasing confidence. Afternoons, they would explore the island, finding hidden beaches and quiet cafes, slowly learning to exist without constantly looking over their shoulders. Therapy helped. Jae-hyun had found someone in Jeju City, a counselor who specialized in trauma, and they both went religiously. Adunni talked about her mother, about Baba Tunde, about the fear that still woke her in the middle of the night sometimes. Jae-hyun talked about the pressure of his family, about the violence he had been part of, about learning to be someone new. It was hard. Some days were harder than others, but they were doing it together. The pregnancy progressed. Adunni's body changed in ways that amazed and terrified her. Jae-hyun became obsessive about her health, reading every book he could find, attending every doctor's appointment, his hand always finding hers when the ultrasound showed their daughter's heartbeat. She is perfect, he whispered the first time they saw her clearly on the screen. She looks like you. She looks like a blob. A perfect blob. Adunni laughed despite herself, something she found herself doing more often now. Laughter had become easier. Joy had become possible. But happiness was fragile, and the past had long fingers. 4 months into their new life, Adunni was at the market when she saw him. Just a flash of a face in the crowd, but it was enough to freeze her blood. Babatunde, her stepfather. Here, in Jeju, it could not be. She was seeing things, trauma playing tricks. But when she got home, hands shaking, and told Jae-hyun, he did not dismiss it. He made calls, reached out to contacts he had promised to leave behind. And what he learned made him go very still. He has been looking for you, Jae-hyun said quietly. Someone talked. Someone from Busan who knew about us. They told him where we went. Adunni felt the room tilt. He found me. After everything, he found me. He will not touch you. I swear on my life, he will not get near you. You cannot promise that. Watch me. Jae-hyun contacted local police, filed restraining orders, hired private security. But Adunni knew restraining orders were just paper. Men like Babatunde did not respect paper. 2 days later, the confrontation came. Adunni was in the garden behind their house, planting vegetables she had bought at the market, when she heard his voice. There you are, ungrateful child. She spun, her heart stopping. Babatunde stood at the edge of the property, bigger than she remembered, meaner. How did you find me? She demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. You think you can hide from me? You think you can run away and play house with some rich man, and I will just forget what you owe me? I owe you nothing. I fed you, clothed you, kept you alive after your mother died. He moved closer. You belong to me. You always have. Stay back, Adunni warned, but her voice shook. Or what? You will call your boyfriend? He cannot protect you from me. No. Jae-hyun's voice came from behind Babatunde, cold and lethal. But I can. Babatunde turned to find Jae-hyun standing there, flanked by 2 security guards. His injured shoulder was still healing, but he held himself with absolute confidence. You are trespassing, Jae-hyun said. Leave now or I call the police. Babatunde laughed, ugly and sharp. You think you're better than me? You think you saved her? She is a whore, always has been. Jae-hyun moved so fast, Adunni barely saw it. One moment he was standing calmly, the next his fist connected with Babatunde's jaw, sending the older man stumbling backward. Say one more word about her, Jae-hyun said quietly, and I will forget I am trying to be a better person. The security guards moved in, restraining Babatunde when he tried to lunge. Zito forward. Police arrived minutes later, sirens wailing. They arrested Babatunde for trespassing and violating the restraining order. As they led him away in handcuffs, he shouted obscenities in Yoruba and English, promises of revenge that echoed across the property. When it was over, when the police were gone and security had swept the area, and it was finally quiet again, Adunni collapsed. Not from fear, from relief, from the sudden, overwhelming realization that it was over. He could not hurt her any more. Jae-hyun held her while she cried, years of terror and rage pouring out in racking sobs. I have got you, he murmured. I have got you. He is gone. You are safe. What if he comes back? Then we will handle it. Together. That night, unable to sleep, they sat on the porch watching stars scattered across the black sky. Adunni leaned against Jae-hyun, his arm around her shoulders, his hand resting protectively on her growing stomach. Marry me, he said suddenly. She looked up at Tom, him. What? Marry me, not for show, not for business. Marry me because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you know you are safe and valued and cherished. Tears filled her eyes again, but different tears this time. Happy tears. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Adunni felt something inside her finally, truly heal. The wedding was nothing like Adunni had imagined weddings could be. No massive church, no hundreds of guests, no elaborate ceremony designed to impress people who did not matter. Instead, they married on the same beach where Jae-hyun had proposed, with a handful of people who had become their small, chosen family. Miss Kim was there, crying openly, which Adunni would tease her about later. Jae-hyun's younger brother attended, one of the few family members who had supported his decision to leave. A few friends they had made in Jeju, people who knew them as the quiet couple, rebuilding their lives, not as heirs and refugees. Adunni wore a simple white dress that accommodated her now prominent belly. At 7 months pregnant, she glowed in a way that had nothing to do with makeup, and everything to do with contentment. Her hair was loose, flowers woven through it by Miss Kim's careful hands. Jae-hyun stood waiting for her in a suit the color of sand, no tie, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. When she walked toward him across the beach, his eyes shone with something that made her chest ache in the best way. The officiant was a local woman, kind and warm, who spoke in Korean and English, weaving both languages together like a bridge. When it was time for vows, Jae-hyun took Adunni's hands. "I am not good with words," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "I am better with numbers and logistics and making plans, but you taught me that the best things in life cannot be planned. You came into my world when I was not looking for anyone, and you changed everything. You made me want to be better. You made me believe I could be better." He paused, swallowing hard. "I promise to protect you and our daughter with everything I have. I promise to build a life where she never knows fear the way you did. I promise to love you even when it is hard, especially when it is hard, because you are worth every difficult moment." Adunni's tears were flowing freely now. She squeezed his hands and found her voice. "I used to think love was a trap, that trusting someone meant giving them the power to destroy you. But you showed me that love can be safety, that trust can be earned. You saved me, not by taking away my power, but by reminding me I had it all along." She placed his hand on her stomach, where their daughter was currently kicking. "I promise to build this life with you. I promise to let you in, even when my instinct is to run. I promise to love you and our daughter with everything I am." When they kissed, the small crowd erupted in applause, and Adunni felt something she had never felt before. Home. Not a place, but a person. A family. The reception was casual, held at a small restaurant in town that they loved. Korean food and Nigerian food, two cultures blending on the table the way they were learning to blend in life. Jae-hyun attempted jollof rice again under Adunni's supervision, and while it was not perfect, it was getting better. Miss Kim gave a speech that made everyone cry. Jae-hyun's brother gave a speech that made everyone laugh. And when it was Adunni's turn to speak, she stood with Jae-hyun's hand in hers and said simply, "Thank you for witnessing our beginning. We promise to make it a good story." As the sun set and the party wound down, Jae-hyun pulled Adunni aside, walking her down to the water's edge where they could be alone. The ocean was calm, reflecting orange and pink light. "Are you happy?" he asked. She leaned into him, careful of her belly, and smiled. I am happier than I ever thought. Possible. Good, because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure it stays that way. That is a long commitment. I am good with commitments, when they matter. They stood there until the stars came out, talking about small things and big things and everything in between. Talking about names for their daughter, about where they might travel when she was old enough, about the garden they wanted to expand, and the life they were building one day at a time. 2 months later, on a quiet Tuesday morning, Adunni went into labor. Jae-hyun had been prepared for this moment with military precision. Bags packed, route to the hospital memorized, phone charged. But when Adunni's water broke, all that preparation flew out the window and he panicked beautifully. Okay, we can do this. Do we need the bag? Of course we need the bag. Where is the bag? Why do we have so many bags? Jae-hyun. Adunni grabbed his arm through a contraction. Breathe. I am breathing. Are you breathing? I am the one in labor. I will breathe when I can. He got them to the hospital somehow, driving carefully despite his panic. The nurses recognized them from prenatal visits and immediately took over with calm efficiency. Jae-hyun stayed by Adunni's side the entire time, holding her hand through contractions, whispering encouragement, looking slightly green when things got intense but refusing to leave. I hate you for doing this to me, Adunni panted during a particularly brutal contraction. That is fair. I am never doing this again. Also fair. I love you so much. I love you too. Labor was long and exhausting and painful in ways Adunni had not prepared for despite all the books. But when she finally heard her daughter's first cry, sharp and indignant and alive, everything else faded away. The nurse placed the baby on Adunni's chest, and she looked down at this tiny, perfect person they had created. Dark hair, her nose, Jae-hyun's eyes. Beautiful in a way that transcended description. Hi, Adunni whispered, tears streaming down her face. Hi, baby girl. We've been waiting for you. Jae-hyun stood beside them, one hand on Adunni's shoulder, the other gently touching his daughter's tiny fist. His face was wet with tears he made no effort to hide. What do we call her? He asked softly. They had debated names for weeks. Korean names, Nigerian names, names that honored their mothers, but looking at her now, only one felt right. Iomide, Adunni said. It means my joy has arrived. Iomide Park, Jae-hyun repeated, testing it. It is perfect. She is perfect. She really is. They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them, a family forged from trauma and choice and love. Outside the hospital window, Jeju Island sparkled in morning light, and somewhere far away their old lives continued without them. But here, in this room, they had everything that mattered. 3 years later, the garden behind their house had grown wild and beautiful. Vegetables Adunni had planted thrived in neat rows. Flowers Jae-hyun had added bloomed in colors that seemed impossible. And in the center of it all, a small girl with dark curls and bright eyes chased butterflies, her laughter carrying on the ocean breeze. Iomide Park was everything they had hoped for and more. Fearless in a way her mother was still learning to be. Curious in a way that kept them constantly vigilant. 3 years old, and already convinced she could do anything. "Appa!" she shouted in Korean, running toward Jae-hyun with a flower clutched in her fist. "Look what I found!" He scooped her up, despite the dirt on her hands, kissing her forehead. "It is beautiful. Did you pick it for Mama?" "No, for you. Mama already has lots." Adunni laughed from where she sat on the porch, watching them. Her Korean was fluent now, her confidence in this country finally matching her determination. She had started teaching English at the local school, loving the work, loving the children, loving the way her life had become about building up instead of just surviving. Jae-hyun had found his own path, too. He consulted for small businesses now, using his expertise to help local entrepreneurs rather than massive corporations. The money was less, but the satisfaction was infinitely more. He came home relaxed instead of tense, spent evenings playing with Iomide instead of working late into the night. They had built something real here, something good. "Story time," Iomide announced, wiggling out of her father's arms and running to Adunni. "Tell me about when you and Appa met." Adunni and Jae-hyun exchanged glances. They had told Iomide a simplified version of their story, appropriate for a 3-year-old. The whole truth would come later, when she was old enough to understand. "Well," Adunni began, pulling her daughter onto her lap, "Mama was very lost and Appa found me." "Like a princess?" Iomide asked hopefully. "Sort of, but Mama saved herself too. Appa just helped. And then you got married and had me." "Exactly right." Jae-hyun sat beside them, his arm around Adunni's shoulders. "Best decision we ever made." Iomide squirmed happily, then noticed something. "Mama, why do you have that mark on your face sometimes?" She was pointing to the faint scar on Adunni's lip, barely visible now but still there, a reminder of where she had come from. Adunni touched it gently. "Sometimes people get hurt before they get better. This is from a long time ago when Mama was scared, but it does not hurt anymore." "Good," Iomide declared, with the certainty of childhood. "I will protect you so no one hurts you again." Adunni's chest tightened with love so fierce it almost hurt. "Thank you, my love. But you know what? You do not have to protect anyone. You just have to be yourself." "What if I want to be strong like you?" "You already are strong. You are the strongest person I know." Iomide beamed, satisfied with this answer, and ran back to the garden to continue her butterfly hunt. Jae-hyun pulled Adunni closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You are good at this, being a mother. I am terrified most of the time. That probably means you are doing it right." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter play, the afternoon sun warm on their skin. This was the life they had fought for. This peace, this simplicity, this love. "Do you ever miss it?" Adunni asked quietly. "Your old life, the power, the money." Jae-hyun was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes I miss the certainty of it, knowing exactly who I was and what was expected. But then I look at this." He gestured to the garden, to Iomide, to her. "And I know I made the right choice. I would choose this 1,000 times over." "Even with all the fear, all the running?" "Especially because of that. It made us who we are." Adunni leaned into him, feeling safe in a way that still sometimes surprised her. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, they called Iomide in for dinner. She came reluctantly, negotiating for 5 more minutes, finally agreeing when promised ice cream after. They ate together at the small table Jae-hyun had built, Korean stew and Nigerian rice side by side, flavors and cultures mixing the way their lives had mixed. Iomide chattered about her day, about the butterflies, about her friend from school, about everything and nothing. After dinner, after Aomide's bath and bedtime story and final requests for water, They stood in her doorway, watching her sleep. Her small chest rose and fell steadily, one hand clutching a stuffed animal, peaceful and safe and loved. "She will never be afraid," Adunni whispered, echoing words she had spoken years ago in a hospital room. "No," Jae-hyun agreed. "She will know she can be afraid and still be brave. That is better." They closed her door softly and returned to the porch, to the stars beginning to appear overhead, to the sound of waves in the distance. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, bills to pay, work to do, a 3-year-old with boundless energy. But tonight, there was only this. Adunni took Jae-hyun's hand, threading her fingers through his, feeling the solid warmth of him. "Thank you," she said. "For everything. For seeing me when I was invisible. For staying when I tried to run. For building this with me." "Thank you for letting me," he replied. "For trusting me when trust was the hardest thing. For choosing to stay." They stood there until the stars filled the sky. Two people who had found each other in the darkest moments and built something bright. Their story was not perfect. It was messy and complicated and born from pain. But it was theirs. And in the end, that was everything. If you enjoyed this story of survival, love, and second chances, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories. Drop a comment below telling us what you loved most about Adunni and Jae-hyun's journey, and hit that like button to help others find this story. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your support means everything, and we cannot wait to share more stories with you soon, so please stay tuned, same time every day.